Green shoots. I want to see green shoots, and I can see Tizz on a FaceTime. He's appalled that I would reference that with our own club.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 65 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. In this episode, I have had the great opportunity to talk with Nick and Tizz, the host of the terrific Hawk Talk podcast. I'll be providing a link to that in the show notes. If you're a Hawk supporter and you're not checking it out, you owe it to yourself to do so. A lot of great insight. You caught at the beginning there a little excerpt from the podcast. That was the first time that I have taken a piece out of the discussion that we had and added it there at the beginning as kind of an entry tagline, if you will. I think that's kind of a neat way to do it. I've heard a couple of other podcasts do that, and I thought it might not be a bad idea to go that approach also. But before we dive in, I wanted to let you know that I've also opened up the storefront for the podcast. I've provided a link in the show notes. It's through Redbubble, and you can find it by searching A Yank on the Footy. And I've got a few designs that are on there right now, and I've got a couple of others I'm looking at. But if you're somebody who's looking for, some way to help support the podcast and, you need a new sticker or you want to get a T-shirt with the Yank on the Footy logo on it, I'd love for you to check it out. The nice thing about Redbubble is that they have printing facilities throughout the world. So if you order something and you're in Australia or in the U.S. or in Canada or in Europe, they print right there and they'll have it to you in just a few days. It's really kind of a neat way to go about doing things. So like I said, I hope you'll check out the storefront. Now, they have things listed on there that quite frankly, I wouldn't be picking up. I saw a shower curtain. I'm not putting up a podcast shower curtain in my house. For one, my wife would not let me do that. But there are all kinds of interesting things that they have there, just in case you might want to check that out. So I'd appreciate it if you do that and maybe help out the podcast a little bit. Money's going to go back into helping to pay for fees for the podcast hosting site and that sort of thing, and hopefully upgrading equipment, renewing some of the recording software that I'm using as well. Now, before I dive into the podcast, I wanted to mention that December 29th is coming up here very soon. That's my first episode, or my first year anniversary, I should say. And my goal, and I kind of set this back in June of this year, July, as the podcast looked like it was going to start actually stabilizing and become something that people would want to check out. I was hoping to get to 10,000 downloads by the first anniversary, and I'm getting close. I'm less than 250 downloads away from the 10,000 of my first goal. So if you're listening to it, if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love for you to share a link to an episode, maybe your favorite episode, one that you really liked, with your friends. Tell them about the interview that I did with Ricky Nixon, or if you're a Bulldog supporter, with Danny Marshall or Cam Richardson, or if you're an NFL fan, with Nathan Chapman, who runs Pro Kick Australia. Some fun interviews that I've done, and this was one of them as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy my discussion with Nick Mason and Tizz of the Hawk Talk podcast. Oh yeah, before we dive in, for those of you who are regular listeners to the Hawk Talk podcast, I found out what Tizz's name is, but I'm really good at keeping secrets, so I'll never tell. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to be joined by the hosts of the Hawks Talk podcast, Nick Mason and Tizz. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on today. I hope you're okay talking to a cat supporter.
It's quite all right. It has to be the right time, the right mood. The stars have to align, but I feel they have. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
No, it's great.
Season is perfect.
Well, that's exactly. Better than round 2 last year, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the first game back.
So it's always an interesting time between these two factions.
But they are both two clubs that have had a long history of success. So they've both been competing with one another for premierships for quite some time. As you mentioned, the Hawks have won a number of years recently. The Cats, let's be honest, the Cats have pushed all their chips in right now to say, we're going to try to win one here in the next year or two. And if they don't, then we may be having a conversation in a couple of years where you guys are pushing from that premiership and the Cats are in their rebuild mode.
It could really swing that extreme of like, as you say, just the clubs repositioning in each other's spots as they are right now. Because that's, Hawthorn is it took a while, but gravity got us in the end, and then Hawthorn's finally conceded, so it seems at least, ahead of the draft, that, the window is well and truly closed and we have to start prying it open again.
Right.
Whereas Geelong is kind of like, well, this is it. This is our shot. And we're going to try and do everything we can to like have another assault at the premiership. Because, I mean, God, they got close. Really, they did. Richmond being as fantastic as they are, Geelong had them in a very good spot to half-time. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily begrudge Geelong's strategy and what they're trying to do. It could well fail. They could end up in a hole in 2 or 3 years, but at least they're having a crack, and you can't begrudge that. Yeah,
so I listened to your episode from like mid-November. It was right around the time of the trade period, and you guys had spoken how you were pretty pleased with the way the trade period had come off for you. Are you still looking back a couple weeks later? You still feeling pretty good about that?
I'll jump in first. I'm not actually sure if Tizz agrees with me on this one, so it'd be good to hear from him as well. But look, it was a fairly academic trade period for Hawthorn. We, had a guy, a key defender in James Frawley that was retired, air quotes, but he's ended up back at St Kilda. And we had Isaac Smith who headed to your Geelong. So we had 2 pretty glaring spots to fill, and then we filled them. And to my mind, that was a very straightforward and successful trade period. It wasn't really messy, and we got done what we needed to get done. But Tizz, I'm curious to see if you agree with me on that one.
Yeah, there was nothing dramatic there. We're suffering at the moment because we've taken so many draft picks and used them for ready-made players in the past, like Geelong is now. So Geelong have doubled down, trying to get a premiership, and Clarko decided he would double down on the talent they had on the list and try to use that for one more. And it didn't pay off, and the calls are all to go back to the draft. But in order to do that now, we've got some old blokes who are too old. If we drop them from our defence, then we're non-competitive for a few years, and Hawthorn don't want to be non-competitive, so they just pull in an older player to come in and hopefully serve us pretty well. I mean, Frawley's now moved on to St Kilda, but I would think about now in the same way that Geelong was in a similar position after 2011. They still made finals for a long time. They lost to us in the prelim, and they reached 2015, and they basically bottomed out for them. And then they've been on the back of Dangerfield and Ablett coming back to the club. They've resurfaced. So we need to make some. We just need to build our youth, really. So I'm excited about the draft this week. That's what Hawthorn's going to do. The other part is off field. Our coaching panels have changed a lot since our successes, except for Clarko. Everyone's left, gone to other clubs, and we've got Sam Mitchell back, who was very successful at West Coast, and now he'll be coaching our second-tier side, the Box Hill Hawks, and it'll be interesting to see whether we can develop a different game plan, because basically that's what's been winning premierships. Hawthorn had a very talented side. The game plan won the premiership in 2016, and then after that, it's been Richmond.
Yeah, it's Richmond. They're a club that you look at them and you think they may not have the best players, but to me, they play better as a team than anybody I've seen in a lot of sports. Their system works so well together.
It works well for them, but the real problem is that as an opposition, you just don't know what's going to happen in the next play. They're very unpredictable, which makes them effective.
Yeah.
Whereas Hawthorn have been very predictable for about 3 or 4 seasons, especially in their forward movement. And the Cats suffer from that too. That's why they dropped Dangerfield into the forward line.
Yeah, it's so you guys you've kind of resigned yourself that you're in a rebuild mode, and it's retooling.
I don't really want to.
I know you don't want to.
No,
it's not
I
something
don't
you
care
want
about
to.
the words.
It's not something.
I don't care about the words, but
okay.
2020 was a season where Hawthorn basically, we looked pretty good. We lost to the Cats. Then we beat Richmond. That shouldn't happen. It's a very inconsistent side. And then we go to Sydney on the hub, and Hawthorn the boys did not perform well in the hub at all. And I've been reading about how Richmond coped with it. Apparently Dimmer didn't cope very well at all, and then they had to have a word with him. So the dynamics within the group obviously failed them. So we've hopefully got a result that doesn't indicate our level of performance and the level of the list.
This has been a consistent theme in our recordings for our podcast, that I think, Tizz, you've been very pointed in stressing that you should be careful in reading too much into this year as far as Hawthorn goes. And that's fair. That's fair. I mean, this is one out of the box. These are circumstances that are, dare I say, unprecedented. The word we all love to hate at the moment because it's bandied around too much. But it's true. This is a year we've not really faced before, and that footy hasn't faced before. So to that end, do we have an accurate gauge on where Hawthorn's at? Maybe not. I think on paper there's a lot of things in our list to address that we saw play out on field. But then, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that do suggest that perhaps, rebuild is too strong because the country was rebuilding. You know what I mean?
Well, Hawthorn players have a lot of faith, We have this thing, trust in Clarko, as our hashtag. And it's probably infuriating for opposition clubs, but we do. We trust Clarko immensely.
Which is in many ways, it's completely the opposite of what happens down the road in Geelong, where, one bad game and Geelong supporters are ready to run, Chris Scott out on a rail. It's like, wait.
He doesn't deal with losses well, and also his finals, his finals campaigns haven't been great, but he's come up against some very good sides at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's true.
He is actually rated by the other AFL coaches in their surveys as the hardest coach to coach against.
I've never seen that before.
I mean, he is good. I mean, there's no doubt. While, and us on our show, we have a bit of fun at Scott's expense, like we highlight the finals record. But the fact is,
as you should. I mean, come on,
isn't it?
If it's a Hawks podcast, you absolutely should.
Oh yeah,
exactly right.
It's really good. We enjoy it a lot.
That being said, you do have to afford credit to a team that's been thereabouts. While they haven't seized the ultimate prize for a while, the fact that they're always sort of thereabouts and in contention is absolutely to the credit of not only Scott, but the players and the list management. I mean, I think Hawthorn tried to, after the three-peat era, definitely tried to defy gravity, like much too long. And that's why we're in the spot that we're in. I would say Geelong, they haven't won a flag, but they have defied gravity. They've always been there. And they've always been annoyingly in contention. And I think there's credit that needs to be extended there. And it pains me to say as a Hawks fan, but, it's there. That's fact. They've always been thereabouts.
And I've had some great moments at the Hawthorn Geelong games. They've been key to the AFL's last 2 decades. They're some of the highlights of the league.
Well, my son, I'm trying to get him interested in the game, and we watched. He ended up going out with some of his buddies, but we did watch the first half of the '89 Grand Final. Online. So that was, and I had not watched it before. I had read about it, but I had. Hawthorn was just obliterating Geelong in the first half of that match. It was just, and then it ended up being like a single goal, difference
in
at
the
the end.
scoring. Yeah, but Geelong were getting in
Well,
some
okay.
fairly significant
Yes.
hits. Yeah.
Well, I was.
It's a very different game, though, isn't it, Craig?
Well, absolutely, it
it's
is.
changed a lot.
Watching them go after Dermot Brereton, right on the opening bounce was just like, okay, balls up, you're down.
That is virtually unheard of. Like that is
I've not seen anything
for,
like it since I've been watching.
Absolutely. It's famous for a number of reasons, but in the context of the modern game, for something like that to happen would be huge news. Like that would be the media would have a field day with it. And I somehow imagine that in the press conference afterwards, the coach would have to apologize for it. Maybe that's how sanitized the game has become, but I don't imagine the club getting away with tactics like that in terms of the PR game.
I don't think you're going to see that happen. We see people do things that are out there that are pushing the envelope, if you will. Tom Lynch kind of got a little bit of a reputation towards the end of the season. Toby Green has a reputation for that. Tom Hawkins, you could argue that maybe they played in the grand final if he kept his elbows to himself, against West Coast, the year before. Maybe. Watching Ben Stratton and Orazio Fantasia a couple of years ago when he came out all bruised up.
Yeah, I was going to mention that one. That was one out of the box as well, and not very sportsmanlike. I'm glad that I didn't see it as a massive deal at the time. I thought it was a big media beat up, but at the same time, you shouldn't be doing that on the field. That's just poor sportsmanship. You don't need that. And the fact was, Stratton is a better player than that. He didn't need it in his game.
Right.
And his CV said to everyone that he didn't need it in his game. So I thought the guy you were going to bring up in Hawthorn colours, though, was James Sicily, who our resident hothead, who's kind of got it out of his game, which is good. He's still a competitive beast, but not to the point where it's problematic.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being competitive. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's you hope that it can be, a clean game, but again, the big issue then is that everybody, as they should be, everybody's concerned about head injuries, that type of thing now, which, you have to be cognizant of and careful of. That's the same thing that's going on in the NFL, in, collegiate sports here as well, that, there are all those concerns with that sort of thing. But, getting back to where the Hawks are right now, because, and I know the word rebuild is not the word that people want to use, but what does a successful 2021 look like for Hawthorn?
To borrow a line from the Carlton Football Club in years gone by, green shoots. I want to see green shoots, and I can see Tizz on a FaceTime. He's appalled that I would reference that with our own clubs, but you got to see signs that we're at least building towards something again. Tizz, I don't know why you're making those faces at me. This is not a revelation.
No, the aim will of course be to get some finals experience into these kids, but what we really need is a new style of play, one that thwarts Richmond. And Clarko's been adamant that he needs McAvoy behind the ball to beat Richmond, and other clubs have tried tools behind the ball to Richmond to kind of stop them from just getting that kick forward and running onto it. That'll be Clarko's, what do you say? He'll just be obsessed with that all year. And that's why we didn't give up Ben McAvoy in the trade period. Offers came from him from the Dogs and other clubs, and they were pretty sizable offers. I felt Hawthorn might entertain them. But they've kept McAvoy, who's in his 30s, on the list, and his best footy's behind him. But it's all to expose Richmond's game plan. And that's what they'll be working over all summer.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? You've got to catch the league leaders. You've got to work out what they're doing and how to beat it. And, we did grab that win over Richmond earlier this year. I think it was a depleted Richmond, if I recall. So take from that
they didn't have Dusty.
A bit of an omission. No Dusty from that side.
Yeah, that's gosh, he is just an absolute terror. He really is. I mean, it's because you don't have a clue.
If there was ever a bloke you're going to line up in a grand final, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's what I've been talking to people about. I said, that the Cats are trying to do something similar to what Richmond has done with Lynch and with Rewalt by having Hawkins and Cameron in there, and having the two talls. And I said, if the Cats can get like 10% of Dusty from somebody like Gary Rowan or Brian Myers, that could be a boon to them, because they're not him. I'm not, and I've said that in other episodes. Dusty is head and shoulders above pretty much anybody else that's doing what he's doing there, but they're trying to emulate that. Hopefully it works out.
But playfully, I might suggest that you don't want to pin your hopes on Gary Rowan at this point.
Well, yeah.
There's some good talent in the twos at Geelong. They just haven't got a look in.
Right.
While.
Absolutely.
That's one thing about Chris Scott. He does back his youth, but you won't see. Sometimes don't see them for long. And Hawthorn, they'll say, "All right, you've got 3 games to prove yourself," and I haven't noticed that at Geelong very much. They seem to flit in and flit out of the lineup.
Yeah, they have.
It's just the different coaching styles.
Yeah, it's if you talked about what looks the green shoots, and that made sense to me. That you're growing something. I get that reference there. Even though we've got snow on the ground here. But what do you consider to be unacceptable for 2021? Hopefully that doesn't happen. But what is the worst case scenario for you that, like, oh no, this is not how we wanted it to go?
Okay, sure.
My worst case scenario, I've got it. And this has worried me for a while. Is the older ages don't mix with the young group, and I think there's a lot of success in that older group and sort of know what they're doing. And Clarko trusts them a lot and picks them a lot, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of friction between the youth coming into that side and the older blokes trying to hang on to their spots.
Yeah, and some of those old blokes that have the resume of those premierships, and they've got their glory, but they're going to have to be respectful and mindful of where the club's at, and the necessity to promote new strategy and new faces as well. My measure of what could of a fail of an F for next year would be the same old. I don't want to see Shields, Mitchell, Warple, and O'Meara the same mix in that midfield for rounds on end. That would be a big mistake. There needs to be some diversity in that mix, and probably across the park, because this is the year where you do it. I think we're a while away from contending, and you've got to work out how to get back in that space. And it's probably not going to be with that same engine room every single week. It's unfortunate that we delisted Jones. Harry Jones would have been one bloke in 2021 I would have liked to have seen given a shot and put into that mix just to see what else he could bring. I want to see stuff from Finn McGuinness. I want to see Cousins if he can take the next step. I guess, in a nutshell, my grounds for deeming 2021 a fail would be no dare to be different, which is ironic because the club launched a dare to be different campaign recently in recent history. So if they don't have that dare, they will fail.
Okay. Now, you guys have grown up, and I guess I should have asked this earlier on, but is being a Hawk supporter, is this something that you grew up in a family of Hawk supporters, or did you? How did that come about?
Yes.
Okay.
I grew up in the very cold climate of Waverley Park during the late 80s, early 90s, learning to swear in the outer.
Okay. So
it's so we've seen some terrific periods, and also there was a 17 year period where we didn't win a premiership, and we were never down for that long, but the club nearly folded. So we've had moments where we've learnt to appreciate football for football's sake and not just for the winning, which is healthy.
I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, so I know all about that.
My dad, I inherited my footy fandom, my Hawthorn fandom from my dad, who, when he was young, like a very young kid, was carried on his shoulders home at halftime from Glenferrie. So that the Hawthorn lineage is definitely there and runs deep. And I think for a while he might have been a bit concerned, because growing up, I being a 5-6-year-old, I think I just quite liked the colours of other teams. And I think football in general interested me. So I can recall having, an Adelaide money box and like a Western Bulldogs football. And, I was growing up on Hawthorn, but I was sort of spreading my wings a bit while still going to Hawthorn games. And then, my mum's side of the family entered the frame and they tried to beckon me to barrack for Essendon, which they did a pretty good job of for a little bit. I had torn allegiances. For a while, it was a 2-horse race. It was Hawthorn and Essendon. And people would ask me, who do you want to win? Like, if they're playing against each other, who do you barrack for? And my answer would be whoever needs the win more, which I thought was fair enough at the time. But it came to the 2001, the 2001 preliminary final, which Essendon just scraped over the line in a heartbreaking loss for Hawthorn. And I was there with my dad and my brother. I'd been to, obviously, many, many, many Hawthorn games with them by that point. I think that was the moment where the spell was broken and there was just no more Essendon in my mind, because I felt it. I felt it in my body, how upsetting it was.
Right.
I was smashed by it. It was a terrible thing, and it taught me that no, I'm Hawthorn. There's no disputing that anymore. So yeah. Well,
and you mentioned. Go ahead.
It's an interesting thing that Hawthorn will be shifting their home again. In the 60s, we were homed in Glenferrie in Hawthorn, and then we moved out to Princess Park, Waverley Park. Now we have our home games at the MCG, and next we're going to be down in Dingley. So we've really shifted our supporter base. It seems there's going to be a lot of change in supporters of Hawthorn, and we're exposing ourselves to new fans when we move down to our new. How much is it worth again? I forget how much the development is.
It's about 100 million.
Yeah. So
wow.
they're trying to create and they're on the record as saying they want to be like a Man United of AFL. Now our system isn't built for it. We have a socialist model of how we go about running the game. So we could never do that. But we certainly want to be leaders off the field.
Yeah, it's meant to be a premier sporting facility that is the envy of not only the entire competition, but sporting clubs around the nation. Like, that's the extent to which they're talking it up. And it certainly seems great on paper. And we've got a little bit of funding. But yeah, it's taking a while. Inch by inch, we're getting there. Obviously, the climate of 2020 and everything that's happened has set us back a bit. But some good things happening with Hawthorn. And as you say, Tizz, there's a lot changing in terms of the supporter base and the demographic that we stand to bring in.
Well, and you guys have, with us, you guys have had 2020 has been a hellacious year for Australia, because you went from the wildfires just devastating so much of the country to walking right into COVID. That literally Australia has not had a chance to catch its breath in over a year. And it's and Tizz, you mentioned something rather interesting there, and I want to kind of ask you about this, because you talked about how Hawthorn wanted to be with, and I'm not a big soccer fan, but you said, was it the Manchester or
Manchester United?
But they're but that Footy operates kind of under a socialist model of sport. Now that's kind of an interesting way that you mentioned that there. But in terms of the game being competitive for all the clubs, is wouldn't that be preferable? I guess.
Yeah, no, that's right. So we could never emulate Manchester, but also over there you're competing against other teams in Europe, and we don't have that in Australia. Right. So we control that.
Yeah, because
and so the aim for the AFL is they get one team wins a premiership every 18 years. That's their ideal.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But because for example, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball here in the U.S., they all have a salary cap. Well, I'm sorry, Major League Baseball does not have a salary cap. That's the one I meant.
Okay.
So the New York Yankees have a salary, well, where they're paying their team almost $250 million for their team's salary. And the Tampa Bay Rays, who were in the World Series this year, their team salary was about $25 million.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that is I believe that's the model that our president, Jeff Kennett, would love to introduce to the AFL landscape. So, I mean, earlier this year, I know Tizz hates me bringing this up, but prior to Hawthorn getting absolutely creamed by Geelong, getting smacked at Cardinia Park, prior to that game, our president, Jeff Kennett, made the statement that, relegation should be a thing that's on the cards in the AFL. Like if a club doesn't have their stuff together, if they don't shape up, then they get relegated. Those comments have not aged too well.
Well, that's a huge swipe at all those clubs that are, well, they're basically bringing the rest of the league down. We're talking about some of the new clubs, some of the badly managed clubs. Coast. Yeah.
Well,
and they've got talent there, and we just don't see enough of it. And when it gets to other clubs, it's not only a problem for the AFL, these clubs not being competitive. It's a problem for the players. We've had a couple of players come from out of Gold Coast who have just relished being at Hawthorn. Far better players now that they're here, and it's really not fair on those young guys. Now, Gold Coast have put up things like, we'd like the first signatures, the guys we take in the draft. Can we have them for 4 years, please? We'll just keep them for 4 years because they keep leaving too quickly. Well, the reason they're leaving so quickly, and this is why Jeffrey wants to have this relegation stuff, is the club's badly managed.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think it's quite a hard line that Jeff has, but I see sense in it because, when you talk about something like the Suns...
But you need to build the game. We've got to build the game, and we've got to reach international appeal. I mean, we won't be going to China again for the foreseeable future. I would imagine.
I was gonna bring that up because I read an article. I have it pulled up here that there's a young man that's in your academy.
In the academy.
Yeah, Connor Downey.
Yeah, that's the one.
Who was hoping to play for the Hawks, but
this is the Yao Ming article, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, I have that one. I have that one pulled up here. But then I also found an article from 2018 where Mr. Kennett said that overseas push is a waste of time and money.
Well researched, sir. Well researched. Yeah, you played that well.
Well, which leads me to then ask about what about Tasmania getting their own club?
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it in terms of it's a very selfish want, but if we got moved out of Tassie, I presume we'd play more games at the MCG, which is
a win-win.
Fine by me. It means I get to see more football. Great.
So are you volunteering north to go to Tasmania? Is that what you're saying?
I can think of a few places north can go.
Okay.
Look, no, that's. I mean, jokes aside, I really don't care what North do in that respect. If they need to go to Tassie and okay, no. Let me rehash that. I care if they're in competition with us for something. The second it becomes about that and securing the Tassie market, North can beat it if that's the case. They can get lost.
That's fair.
But
that's fair.
If it is our endeavour to move out and then North want to establish their base there, then by all means, if that's what they need to do, then fine. They have my blessing for what it's worth.
Well, because it's like the Tasmanian dream of a team is pretty much shot now, because their leader, or the guy pushing the movement, has come out and said, Hawthorn and North Melbourne have done no good in having games down there.
Yeah, that was
over the last 20-year period. I thought that was a really strange thing to say, and it just sort of puts everyone offside, and I don't think they can negotiate from that position.
Yeah, those were comments made just recently. I'm familiar with them, Tizz. I'm surprised it hasn't come up on our podcast, actually. We haven't talked about it. But those comments were made that these two clubs have done nothing for Tassie. And I don't see how that can possibly be true. How long is well, for Footy in Tassie, but like, how long has Hawthorn alone, that relationship has been well over a decade, 15 years or something?
It's 20 years. It's 20
years. Yeah. I mean, that's,
but we need to be going to somewhere like Hawaii, don't we? Wouldn't it be great to play in Hawaii?
The Hawaii Hawks.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, well, if you want to come play in Ohio, I would certainly come watch.
Absolutely.
I know that there was the talk about GWS and Essendon playing a game in Los Angeles this spring, and I was trying to figure out, how in the hell am I going to get to Los Angeles to go watch this game? Because I've never seen a game in person.
Yeah.
This is, to me, it's still mind-boggling to me that I'm talking to you gentlemen, which I'm thrilled to be doing, about a game that, that I've never actually seen played in front of me. So,
well, if it makes you feel,
see it, you're gonna absolutely love it when you see it, though. I can tell you now, it is so much better in person than on the television.
And I will say, I don't know if this will make you feel any better. In fact, I'm sure it won't. But in terms of us extending empathy for your plight, it's been a fair while since we've seen a game in person as well at this point.
Fair point. Yes,
it was our last game. It's rare. It's actually, I don't know what our particular listeners think, but it's rare for Tizz and I to attend a game explicitly together. Like, we might be at the same game in our respective circles, but it's very rare that we both head off to a game together. And the last game was an occasion in which we did that. And it was Jared Ruffhead, his final game for the Hawthorn Football Club, legend of the club. You might be familiar with him.
Right.
Massive send-off. He kicked 6 goals, very emotional and fun day. And it's very surreal to think that was the last time we were at the Footy.
Yeah, that was... That I did see that because if I'm not mistaken, Bob Murphy and Lance Franklin were both there. I think it was Murphy. I think it was they were there in the locker room after the contest, congratulating him. I think that was
Murphy wouldn't surprise me. He's friends with Ruffy, and their families, respective families, get along well. He had a great contingent of past Hawthorn players as well. I mean, Jordan Lewis was there, Birchall, Buddy Franklin made the trip.
That's who I think I might be thinking of, is Jordan Lewis rather than Murphy. That's
if it turned out, if there was a revelation that Murphy was there, probably I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, but it's been it has been absolutely a joy learning about this game over the last few years, and getting a chance to talk to fans and supporters like yourselves about it has just been an absolute blessing for me. Now, one thing before we wrap up here, because I know you guys have got a busy Sunday ahead of you, and actually a couple of questions yet. Which club do you think had the best trade period?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I would need to go back and do my homework on that again, because it feels like it's been so long, but I think the Bulldogs did pretty well.
Okay.
I think also St Kilda are well primed to do exactly what they need to do in 2021. I mean, they made the semi-final in 2020. Really, they should be pushing for a prelim final berth. They need to go one better, and with the list that they now have, I think that they can. They had a successful trade period. I think they're well primed to do exactly that. So that's a big tick in my book. I don't know what you think, Tizz.
I would say those two were 1 and 2, and then Geelong would be third. I think they strengthened their forward line really well.
Geelong's an interesting one, because obviously they gave up a lot to get that Cameron deal done, but I think that's what they needed to do. And, Smith and Cameron, those acquisitions in that period, that is what I was referring to, like before, that idea of just keeping things aloft and keeping that window open. They're going all in, and you could do much worse than Smith and Cameron. Like, they're decent acquisitions in order to keep that premiership hope alive. So I think they did well.
And we've got to drum up Melbourne. Of course, Melbourne will be really good next year. They'll be terrific. Get the bandwagon going. Ben Brown's there. They finally got a tall target in the forward 50. It's going to be great to watch.
You guys were referencing this in the episode that I listened to earlier today. Yeah. Oh yeah. So you must have a real soft spot in your heart for the Demons.
Oh, absolutely. They were to be the team we would have merged with back in '96. And so there's still friction between the supporter bases.
Okay, well.
They voted for it. They voted for it, Melbourne, and the Hawks voted against.
And look at us now.
Well, that's, yeah. Now, the last thing before I let you gentlemen go, there were several rule changes that have been made this year, but if you had a chance, if they come to you and say, okay, we're going to give you an opportunity to add one new rule change that's not there, what would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think it's very telling that the things that spring to mind for me are repealing some of the changes that have been made.
That's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, so I'm just going to spitball here and not land on any one particular one. I think the protected zone has gone way too far in terms of around the set shots and free kicks and that sort of thing. I think players are penalised for acting fairly innocently and innocuously, like they don't mean to infringe, and then suddenly it's just ridiculous and it's paid. Third man up in the ruck, I think, can come back. That would get things moving. I mean, there's, in terms of new, like, novel ideas, I don't have one at the ready. I've just mostly spent the last few years bemoaning the little tweaks that they've made, and I would walk them back. So, Tizz, do you have any that are similar or different to that?
Yeah, I would make the grounds uniform. I would have all the grounds the same size. And I would kill off a lot of the home ground advantage, because I think there's a lot of teams that just make finals every year on home ground advantage stakes. And I'm not sure that it's good for the game to have that kind of built-in advantage.
The Geelong cap has come on.
He put the cap on. No, it's interesting because
to be fair to you, Tizz, I thought you were referring mostly to West Coast, because the noise of affirmation over at Optus Stadium is famous. Like they hold massive sway over the umpiring over there.
Yeah. It's in the stats too. You can see it. It's not it's conspiracy theory. It's definitely.
And that's why I feel comfortable saying it. I don't have to be culpable of sour grapes or anything like that. There are figures to show that West Coast has benefited enormously from favourable umpiring for a long time now. So there's got to be something to it.
I just think part of a professional league, you have to have those constraints on the game.
Yours is very costly, though, Tizz. Like, it needs to be a fair injection of cash to make grounds uniform in the way you're suggesting.
Unless you make them all smaller.
Well, you would have, because I don't know how much room they would have down at Cardinia Park to actually widen it. I know that they're getting ready to rip out if I'm not mistaken, the Ablett stand and rebuild that with like 4,000 additional seats.
They're doing some work down there.
150 million.
Yep, and you guys didn't get any of that from what I remember.
No, we haven't received any state funding. We got the federal stooges to chip in, which is good. Jeff knows people in high places still, so
there you go.
It worked out in the end. We got some money. Geelong's stadium should be a ripper by the time it's done. It's great. It's great for Geelong. I've never been there. I would love to go there.
Neither have I. No, I've never been to a game there.
The hostile environment would be a unique way of watching the footy.
Maybe you go down there for a neutral game. Maybe you go down there for a Geelong Gold Coast game. or something of that nature.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I mean, at the end of the day, I just like football, so I would
There you
not
go.
hate it. And I don't actually mind Geelong as a suburb either. What I'm trying to say is, it's just the team. Uh, no, I kid. What is really the truth for me, at least, as a Hawthorn supporter, and the long-standing Hawthorn-Geelong rivalry, is that they're both powerful clubs. And you got to respect that. And I hope it goes both ways. I don't see Geelong as just this annoying gnat that you're just irritated by and swat away. No, you have to sort of look at what they do and pay some sort of regard and respect to it. And honestly, I think that's what makes the rivalry between the two clubs so good. It's this mutual admiration and respect of, like, these are two big clubs. These are two big powerhouses that go at it.
Now, would you say that Geelong is Hawthorn's biggest rival?
It's tough. We haven't.
It is in recent history, yeah.
Yeah, recent history, definitely. The only close competitor to that might be Sydney, but no, it's got to be Geelong. Throughout history, Hawthorn's made a lot of famous foes. North Melbourne, Essendon, but Geelong's probably been the through line, hasn't it, Tizz? Like, that's been a huge one.
Yeah, our first grand final loss was to Geelong in '63, so.
That's when I was born, so I was. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for coming on today. This was very informative. I'm glad to get your thoughts on where Hawthorn is and where you see them going, and hopefully the green shoots do crop up.
Tizz is going to hate me for that line.
I as a teacher, I like that line. I think that's a great line to use. I mean, that you want to see. It's basically a fancy way of saying you want to see growth in the young players. Yeah.
I'm excited for the draft. I mean, as we're recording this, the draft is in a few days, and
Right.
I'm excited to see who we bring in and how that shapes 2021. For the first time in a while, my measure of success is not a great finals campaign or just surging to the top 8. It's readying ourselves for that next push. And I want to see signs that we are indeed readying ourselves, and it will come through the likes of, I'm so excited to see Will Day, who was our recruit from last year, our star recruit. And, more signs like that. More signs where it's like, wow, this kid can play. He's going to be something long term. That's going to make me enjoy footy the most next year. And I think in that sense,
he's got it in his
Tizz is
DNA
on board.
too.
He does, indeed. I would hope that Tizz is on board at least with that sentiments, rather than the green shoots thing might be a bit much for him.
What I'd love to see is Hawthorn develop an academy. Just start an academy down at Dingley or wherever they begin, and build the game and build some young talent through that, because we're seeing some interstate sides just nail the draft through their academy picks. And it's a very big advantage, and most Victorian clubs are going to have to either develop a father-son academy or some kind of academy just to keep up.
Can I say, I know we're signing off, but I want to extend a thanks to you, Craig. And also, I think it's incredibly enjoyable for us as fans of this game to see it have international appeal like this. I know as I was growing up, it felt like very much from the outside looking in as far as the NBA is concerned. NBA was like a massive thing here in the 90s growing up in Australia. And it was always, you felt a sense of disconnect. It's like, I like this, but I'm so on the outside of it. But, we're in 2020. We can connect this way. It's enormously gratifying to see someone from the other side of the world take an interest in this game. And I like that we've been able to share the passion today. It's been really fun. So thanks for having us.
You bet. Absolutely. I love talking to you guys. I as you mentioned, I love good footy. I don't hate any club. I mean, it's, it's,
you got to go to an Easter Monday clash with us, and that might come to you.
Well, I should say when I get there, my plan is, and I have sat down numerous times with the different like airline schedule things and the fixture to figure out, okay, if I was going now, if I left on this day, I could go and see, 3 games this weekend. And if I stayed through the following weekend, I could see 3 more games that weekend and then come home, that sort of thing. And it's been, it has been so enjoyable meeting so many different people online and talking and engaging with people that, I talk to more people in Australia than I do in the United States at this point in time. I really do. I don't, there are a few people online that I'll talk to that are footy fans. And, and you mentioned something, Nick, a little while ago about how when you were becoming a Hawthorn fan, you were torn between them and Essendon, that you had, I think, you had a pencil box or something that was a Crow's pencil box or something along that line. But
all over the shop. Hawthorn blood, Hawthorn interest, but I don't know what was going on there for me as a kid. But,
because I asked this question when I first started following the game, and I'm trying, I own 2 or 3 Geelong shirts, 3 or 4 hats, that sort of thing. But I asked people in like the general forums online, I said, well, what if I'm trying to draw interest in the game, I said, is it acceptable if I'm a Cat supporter? Is it okay for me to wear, to find a Hawthorn polo shirt or an Adelaide polo shirt to wear to work and that sort of thing? And people were like, no, you'd get killed here for doing that, for wearing somebody else's colors. I said, well, I'm 10,000 miles away and nobody knows who these folks are. I said, if this can help to drum up some interest in the game, I said, does it, get more support here? Does it hurt?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to try and spread the game to the US. I think there's a lot of people who would enjoy our games there.
Well, it's at the very least, given Hawthorn's colours, I mean, it's an interesting fashion statement. People are going to be asking questions with the golden brown. What is that you're wearing? What is that? Did you lose a bet?
I will recommend to you, Google the University of Wyoming.
Can I do that now?
Sure, because it's it's a similar color combination. WYOMING, Wyoming football.
University of Wyoming football, and as we load that up, the suspense is killing me.
That's almost
very similar.
Yeah,
I'm right behind
doesn't look bad,
you.
Does it?
Yeah, I've my slow internet has held us up, but I imagine it's going to be worth it. Okay, wow, okay.
Pants, yeah.
I had no idea that our colours were represented over the other side of the world.
If you follow the NFL at all, the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills played at the University of Wyoming.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting there for me, looking at those images psychologically, I immediately felt a kinship for this team that I know nothing about. So it runs deep, is what I'm saying. Perhaps worryingly deep, my allegiance to Hawthorn. So I've learned a bit about myself today.
There you go. Yes, that is. They have. It is one of the more unique color combinations.
It is. Do whatever you feel to promote the game over there, but people are right in saying that.
They've gotten on to filling it out with white as well.
Yeah, just to take the heat off the other color combination. Craig, no, you're right in saying that in Australia doing that would be interesting, in say a workplace environment, to say the least, to rock up with different colours on. I really do think the first reaction would be, clearly you had a bet over the weekend and you have to rock up to work wearing different colours. But if you can get away with it in the US to promote the game, I'm all for that. I think it's fantastic to speak to someone who's all the way over the other side of the world who genuinely seems really passionate about the game. So that's great.
Terrific. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. And ladies and gents, I want to thank Nick Mason and Tizz from the Hawk Talk podcast for joining me this morning. Gentlemen, thanks so very much.
It's been a pleasure. When you get here, get to Easter Monday, grab a drink with us. We'll be happy to have you. And hopefully it's someday soon. Go Hawks and good luck, Cats.
I'd like to thank Nick and Tizz from the Hawk Talk podcast for joining me for this discussion this past weekend. It was an absolute joy to talk to you gentlemen. A lot of fun. I appreciate you not giving this Cat supporter too much of a hard time. I learned a lot about the Hawks, their history, where the supporters see them going forward. Learned a lot about how much people love the phrase green shoots. So, gentlemen, thanks so very much to the two of you. I really appreciate you coming on. I cannot thank you enough. And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that if you'd like to sign up for the mailing list so that you get each episode delivered to you first, there's a link to a short form in the show notes. If you'd like to sign up, I'd love to add you to the list. There are like 4 questions on there. It's asking for your name, who you support, what state you live in, and your email address so I can get the episode out to you. Also, if you've got an idea for a show topic or someone you think I should talk to that would be a great guest for the show, feel free to drop me a DM on Twitter or shoot me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm discovering new guests all the time. I've got a couple of great interviews set up this week still to do. One for sure this week, I'm going to be speaking with the founders of one of the newest clubs in the USAFL. I'm looking forward to that discussion. Remember that while you can find all the episodes for the podcast at yankonthefooty.podbean.com, you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. Every episode's also available on my YouTube channel. Just search out my name, Craig Wessels. And now that you've listened, I'd love for you to give me a review on Apple Podcasts. Takes just a couple of minutes. Lets me know what you think of the show, what I could do better, what's going well. Lets other people know, hey, I should check this out. This is worthy of my time. And also, as I said earlier, folks, I would love for you to share the podcast with your friends. Just pop a link on your social media. Let them know that you think it's all right. And don't forget that you can reach me at yankonthefooty@gmail.com as well as at yank_on on Twitter and on Facebook and Instagram at yankonthefooty. You can also, like I said, find the podcast on YouTube. Also, I'd like to thank Joseph McDade for the use of 2 of his great pieces of music. Mr. McDade created some fantastic music, and I'm using Backplate and Elevation. You can reach him at josephmcdade.com/music. Mr. McDade, thanks again for your hard work. Oh, by the way, you can also find his work on Spotify as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. I appreciate you tuning in. I really, truly do. And while we're fans of our teams, and our teams' competitions have quite frankly begun in the last couple of weeks with the trade period and now with the draft, we're fans of a game that we all love, and that's the game of footy, whether it's at the AFL level or the Sandful or the Kneeful or the Waffle, or being played in the Northern Territories or Tasmania. This is a fantastic game, and I so truly appreciate all of you who have shared the game with me and are helping me learn about the game. I cannot thank you enough. And ladies and gents, thanks again. And I do ask that you share the podcast with your friends and family. And may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode number 65 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter or the yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. And please share a link with the podcast with your friends and family. Until next time, ladies and gents, goodbye.